What's up, everybody? This is Sound Off with Stixx. This is Keith Stixx from Tsunami Cables, and I'm here with Chance Onody.
Yep, Chance Onody.
Got it right?
Yep.
Awesome. Chance is a Tsunami artist and an amazing upright bass player as well as electric bass player.
Thank you.
And so welcome, Chance.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm going to crank your level just a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
You're good.
No problem.
And awesome. So let's kind of take the time machine back, and I want you to let everybody know kind of who you are and where you came from, and the start of you as a musician.
All right. Well, yeah, that does go back a little bit. Hi, I'm Chance Wilder Onody, and I started out as a classical player, but even before getting to that, I'm from Canada originally, a small town called Invermere in British Columbia. And in that small town, we actually had a ukulele group. And it was kind of like part of like the middle school ukulele group. And that was cool. I think it was Silver Strings. So that's where I got first exposed to like a string instrument, because it was just kind of fun.
Yeah.
And moving around. And then also being a kid, you kind of have piano forced on you a little bit.
Right.
Which I totally wish I stayed with more. I still play piano, but not like there's times I'll listen to a beautiful concerto and be like, I wish I could just sit down and play it. It might take a while.
Yeah.
And then, so from moving from Canada to the United States, I was a bit of a, moody preteen, all upset, new country, no friends, all this kind of stuff, new school, huge school. So like my town when we left was like 2,800, almost 3,000 people.
Okay.
To the high school I went to was Corona Del Mar High School in Newport Beach, and that had, at the time I enrolled in that high school, there was a little over 3,100 students.
Right.
So it was like going to a school with the entire population of my town was a huge shock.
Yeah.
So I was, to say the least, fish out of water and kind of upset. So I was constantly, like, when I was looking at the syllabus of things to do, I was like, I just wanted to do really nothing. I was kind of upset. And I had this elective options, and there was something like introduction to like marine biology and then orchestra. And so orchestra, it said strings, and it was a music class, and my initial thought was strings, guitar. I'm cool, I'll get to learn how to play guitar. There's going to be no homework.
Right.
Perfect. I don't want any more homework. I'm already mad.
Right.
And so I go in with the assumption I'm going to be, entering this room. There would be guitar players. We can finally learn how to play some guitar. Wrong. I walk in, and the music director obviously has been through this a lot, because he's just like, no, it's a common misconception, but string instruments means violin, viola, cello, double bass.
Yeah.
And he could see that I looked disappointed, because I was like, in my mind, I was like, I'm going to have to go and get the other elective and do homework.
Yeah, apparently I'm
a
marine biologist.
Yeah. And he looked at me, he was like, well, do you play any of these? And I made a split-second decision. I looked around, like, I'm a big guy. I've always been a bigger, heavier guy. So I looked around, and I saw a big instrument, and it was in the back. And I was like, so I was just like, oh yeah, I play the one in the back. And he's like, oh, you play the bass? I was like, yeah, I play the bass. Which he could totally tell I was lying.
Right.
But I also had, because I was a bit of moody and stuff, I had an attitude. I didn't like the way he kind of called me out about it. He wasn't really calling me out, but it felt like he was condescending a little bit. And so I called him on it. But what he did was like, well, it's not on the syllabus, but we have a beginning strings class, which is held over in the other room, which was the choir room back then. And he's like, we hire a private instructor and bring you over, and you learn to play, and then you can come over and join orchestra.
That's cool.
And I absolutely that initially, because I was just like a little shit at the time. I'm sorry if I
you're good.
Because it's good. All right, so shit at the time, and it was completely. I was like, no. I got it. This is fine.
Yeah.
I got it. And because I could still from the ukulele, I could.
Right.
I could play music and sheet music from piano, and we actually discovered I have a form of absolute pitch with instruments. Like with the human voice, it's very difficult for me to really zero in on a sound, but like on a piano, and especially bass, I know what the note is.
Cool.
And it's been always like a real good thing in the back pocket. Also annoying, because you can hear when everything's a little bit out.
Yeah.
And so he gave me a deal, was, okay, we how would you sit and play with the orchestra for the first 45 minutes of class, and then in the last 15 minutes of class, we'll have you sit in front and play the first 20 measures of the piece that we're playing. And that happened to be the Bach double violin concerto, which in the continuo section is pretty hard.
Yeah.
It's like boom, 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 it keeps going and going.
Yeah.
And there's one other bass player there at the time. And so I watched him like an absolute hawk when we came in, but I came into the instrument with like, all right, listen to him tune. I was like, oh, okay, so yeah, I know what it is. E, A, D, and G. I'm like, okay, I know that. And I watched his hands. I'm like, okay, so this is where the notes are going to be around here. And so instead of learning positions or anything like that, I immediately was just trying to find notes solely on the sound.
The pitch.
And I had, we both were totally wrong when it came to playing the instrument because the school didn't have German bows, we only had French bows. And I just looked at him and he was holding a French bow the way you would hold a German bow.
Gotcha.
Totally wrong, but I didn't know, and so I was like, okay, same thing.
Right.
And that's how eventually I got a German bow and stayed with playing with the German bow most of the time. And luckily there's a lot of mistakes happening in the upper strings, so we kept going over the first beginning of the song over and over and over again.
Gotcha.
So when it came time for me to do my little mini audition, I passed.
Yeah.
And I only got to pay, not even the first 20 bars, I got to pay through the first, I think maybe 14 bars, because it's 16th notes almost right away.
Right.
And they're like, oh, yeah, oh, guess he wasn't lying. Totally was. Sorry about that. But it was a cool thing, and then since then, I just started to fall in love with the instrument. Because it was an orchestra of just violin players, predominantly we had like a cellist come and go, a violist come and go from time to time, like they would come in or they would transfer to another school or just graduate and be gone. I naturally assumed the state of music for playing any kind of like solo repertoire or just repertoire in general was this Baroque and classical music, and especially what the violin players were playing. And so not having teachers or instructions, because when we came down, wasn't in like the most financial ability to go out and get teachers and all this kind of stuff too.
Right.
So it was more just like hanging around my friends. I made friends with the violin players and asked if we could borrow their sheet music. And the beauty of things at that age is no one really says no to you.
Right.
It's more like, yeah, man, sure, take it, photocopy it.
Right.
And so I spent all my recess breaks and my lunch break in the practice room working on Vivaldi Winter.
Nice.
And we had a man named Albert Wu, who became the executive director of the Irvine Young Concert Artists, was going around to different schools to pick up children to put into his orchestra. And what was beautiful about that orchestra was that everyone has the opportunity to be a soloist and then be put into like the core circle of soloists in that orchestra that get to play the solos more often than the others. And he came across me in the practice room, woodshedding away on Vivaldi Winter, but the solo violin line on bass.
Yeah.
But I just naturally, because I didn't know any better, I just thought that's what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to try and learn, and it blew my mind because I was like, this is incredibly difficult music.
Right.
and instead of him saying, hey, what are you doing? It's a bass, don't do that.
Right.
He fully accepted it and was like, actually, hey, you know what? I'm putting together this orchestra, and at that time he had his colleague was Misha Likirovich. And both of them just renowned, phenomenal violinists. They could just pick up and play almost any concerto from memory, and it'd be perfect.
Wow.
And with great interpretation, just beautiful, beautiful players. So they really crafted out and grabbed really talented kids from all around Orange County to build the Irvine Young Concert Artist. And so it was really nice that he actually decided to put me in front as a soloist, and one of the first solos I ever got to play was the first movement of Vivaldi Winter on bass. A little under tempo, but that's what really started my love for the instrument, was that I felt this freedom because people they were accepting me with what I was doing, and no one was really trying to say, no, don't do this, don't do that.
Right.
And then I started really hunting down, like, okay, who are really these amazing bass players? And this is back when I was still really only focusing on like the classical context.
Right.
But I was really getting interested into like what a bass guitar would be. And so I started hunting down all on like when iTunes was kind of first coming up. So I was like always looking through, like searching for bass solos and all this kind of stuff.
Okay.
And that's where I fell in love with bass guitar. And I really fell in love with people like Victor Wooten, Marcus Miller, Michael Manring, especially all like the beautiful harmonic work that he can do is just it's stellar and incredible. And I thought it was amazing when I went to a music store to play bass guitar, how much smaller it is than the double bass,
right.
and that I realized like I could do a big hand stretch and cover so much more distance, and it has frets. So I just like it just felt so much more comfortable to play on, to pick up and go.
Gotcha.
And that's what started that with bass guitar. And bass guitar I got was right around when I turned 15, I think.
Okay.
And I started the music with the orchestra, I believe was like 13 turning 14.
Nice. Okay.
And it was funny in that time because I really just dove into it as my free time of loving this instrument, and to me it was just something like, it was so therapeutic. I was so angry from moving from another country to the States with, young kid, no friends, anything like that. When you first show up, you have to do that again, and I did, and I actually found a lot of acceptance because I was a big kid in football, and that's actually ended up being something I was trying to pursue more in school than anything else was football. But I just really enjoyed music as like my therapy kind of thing, my hobby, my lot of fun, and I didn't really even really fully register that I started actually working professionally with music. Like 15 and a half was when I was telling the story earlier about my dad's friend Michael Goguen, who's a well-known actor and also had a well-known music career, was looking for a bass player, and my dad happened to tell him that, my son Chance plays bass, and he kind of like, he's young, doesn't really do much, but he gave me just like what was supposed to be just the opportunity of like, playing in the studio, kind of seeing like how things went. And they ended up using me for 4 of the songs on the 4 of the songs on that record, and that's what started my my studio career, was working with Michael and then the engineer at the time, and then so Michael and the engineer kept in contact with my dad. So whenever people started wanting bass player, and of course I was really young, so I didn't I didn't know what the rates were or anything like that. So I was charged I was just playing for very, very, very little, but constantly getting a lot of work, and playing all the time. To me, it was just a ton of fun.
Oh, absolutely.
All the fun. So while I was doing that, I was in Irvine Young Concert Artist playing classical music and working as a classical soloist. And so I've always had that marriage between the contemporary and classical music, because I just love classical music. I started with it, play with the bow. I have the Ennis electric upright that I play all the time, because it's so much easier to lug that around than the real upright, and it has beautiful sound with a bow. And that took me forever to find an electric instrument that could sound good with a bow.
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely.
So it's quite a really backwards way of getting into music. It was kind of like, oh man, I don't want homework.
Right.
I'm gonna take this music class, and then all of a sudden I just fell in love with the instrument, and it just kind of took off from there.
No, that's awesome. That's great. Well, it's cool because, in a way, not having all of the friends and all the distractions and all that kind of stuff also kind of lend itself to you having the time. To be able to do to be able to do music and stuff like that. So that's actually really pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. So that got you into basically like through high school, right?
Yep.
And then then after high school, when you're still a fairly young guy, but out of high school,
I like to think so.
Out of high school, what were some of the things that you kind of started doing? So you were you still doing the orchestra outside the?
Yes, and then during that time I also expanded my orchestra playing to a few other groups that were like semi-professional orchestras in Southern California, and knock on wood, it was always a kind of a thing to me. Well, if I'm going to work in another group, I always wanted to make sure that I was good enough to be in there, and I wanted to make sure that I could lead a section. So I had a real affinity for being section leader. Gotcha. And so luckily I never sat anything less than principal chair in all the orchestras that I worked with, and from I'm trying to look over at my mom, because it was about 21 different orchestras between the age of 17 and 22 that I would just consistently go in a circle around and work with across LA and Orange County. And that was where it was all of a sudden started getting in my head like, well, this is kind of like you start looking at college coming up, and what do you see with music? Well, it's like these orchestra life. Mm. And then there was one season where we all played Symphonic Metamorphosis, the Hindemith. Beautiful piece, but every orchestra played it in the same season. Gotcha. So I was just inundated with this music, and I was really starting to feel like this isn't what I want. Right. This isn't what I want to do as being just the orchestra member. I really enjoyed being the soloist, and that's gotcha. Where, luckily I had a lot of people who believed in me they started telling me, well, you know, that's what you should do, and that's what you like to do. Right. Just come on out and be a soloist, keep auditioning for doing solo spots with the orchestras.
That's cool.
And that's what really pushed that forward. I was really lucky because with the Irving Young Concert Artists, we actually, just before, the summer before I graduated high school, or the summer that I did graduate high school, I think both summer before college, was 2008, and we got to do the 2008 Olympic Games and a big tour. So we did a week in South Korea. Wow. As like the pre-part of the tour, and we got to play the beautiful hall there, and I got to play in every city. We got to play a solo. So I played a solo in Seoul, and that's where I made my big debut as a soloist. So that was when I was still 17. Wow. And I was with Irving Young Concert Artists alongside the Seoul Philharmonic. And it was this just huge, beautiful thing that I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm getting to play, and I get to make my debut, and I got to play the Krusevitsky Concerto. Okay. And just the first movement, not the whole thing, because we're like part of as I was saying earlier, like the beautiful part of that orchestra is they always wanted to have players playing solo. So mainly, we never really got to play full concertos until later on. Okay. With that group, it was you pick whatever movement you want to do, and then you get to play it. Cool. You still have to audition because as more people come in, they wanted to make sure that, you know, you're not, there was no like a seniority kind of thing. It was, right. All right, you got to audition against your friends and your peers in the group still to be able to continue to play solos. Right. And then so when we went to China, we started in Shanghai, and then we took the bus over to Hangzhou, then went to Xi'an, where we actually got the key of the city. Wow. In Xi'an, then up to Beijing before the games, and then up to do 2 performances there. So in each city we did 2 to 3 performances. Wow. And then up to Qinghangdao, where we got to see, like, you know, where the Great Wall meets the water. Okay. And that was really cool, and that's actually where the Olympic dignitaries were having like their big official meetings, and we got to have intimate performance with just them watching. Wow. So it was a big, and then back to Beijing for the games. And it was just this amazing tour, and and that's where I really loved it, because I got to play solo in every city. Yeah. And it was good. I didn't have to play the same one, so I played like the first move of the Krusevitsky, and then I remember the 3 pieces that I jumped between was the first movement of the Krusevitsky Concerto, second movement of the Echo Sonata, and the fourth movement of the is there 4 movements? Yeah, the last movement of the Echo Sonata. So the fast ones. Gotcha. Yeah. And to me, this was fun to do. Right, of course. And it was just this wonderful kick-ass tour. Yeah. And it was long because, I think the China portion was 2 weeks. Wow. And we're going around, and from that I got to nice little feathers in the cap of being we became the first orchestra that was allowed and got to play on the Great Wall of China. Wow. And so because of that, I also happened to be the soloist, one of the 4 soloists that day, so I became the first bassist to play a solo on the Great Wall of China. Wow, with a full-size orchestra. Yeah, man, that's awesome. And that was just, it was awesome. I loved it. It was an amazing time. And then since then, I started picking up doing more tours and pushing my own solo career. And I was still more focused on classical, even though I was having a lot of fun with bass guitar, doing like solo jazz, arrangements of piano pieces, and earning endorsements and sponsors along the way. And I was still really focused more on classical because it was just where I just loved the way the instrument sings with the bow. Right. And then later on, because I'm kind of jumping between time here, is where I kind of like started mixing both of them together as the lead lines in my own personal music that I'm writing. So moving into college was kind of meh for me. Yeah, I didn't enjoy it. They were really trying to. I really realized they try to make a machine cog out of you. Like you're going to be, all right, if you're going to play this instrument, they didn't believe in like the solos and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It was orchestra member. You
Right.
play excerpts,
Yeah.
maybe a couple Bach cello suites,
Right.
and then just and I hated it.
Yeah, no, I
it just
understand
wasn't.
that.
It wasn't for me.
Absolutely.
And then I got the opportunity to leave and go on tour with Dean Anderson, who's he was still is a music director of multiple orchestras, and it was an amazing guy because we clicked, and to have me play solo we did a tour over to Hong Kong.
Wow.
And this was actually, it was like I was turning 21 on the plane to Hong Kong, and I got to play. Ooh, let me turn that down. My phone. Big old no there.
No, that's all good.
And then, so it was amazing that I got to do this thing, and so I realized when I got there it was with Hong Kong Chamber Orchestra, and then I wasn't told. It was funny. It would have been better if they told me after, but they told me right before my solo. They were like, "Oh yeah, you're the second bass player to play solo with us." I was like, "Oh, that's awesome. Who was the first?" And it was like Gary Carr, who was like the preeminent, like just a wonderful upright bass player, like just ungodly talented.
Right.
And so I was like, "Oh, what?" And they're like, "Yeah, good luck on your show."
Yeah. See you later.
But so that was a 2-part tour. So I got to go to play with the Hong Kong Chamber Orchestra, and so I played the Grand Duo Concerto with Mira Klomek on violin. She's an amazing violinist.
Wow.
And I just love Bottesini concertos and pieces, and that Grand Duo was just something that was like, man, I got the opportunity to play this. I get the opportunity to play this internationally on a big stage. It was just a beautiful thing as well. And then we went to Thailand on the second week, because I think it was about 2 weeks total that we were gone for these performances to play at these with these two groups. Mm-hmm. And it was with the Hong Kong Chamber Orchestra, and then Thailand was with the Siam Sinfonietta. And I didn't even know that I would be the first bass soloist to play with them.
Right.
And same repertoire, playing the Grand Duo Concerto, which is just a wonderful piece of music, so much fun.
Cool.
And because of that, I got to, after the first rehearsal, I was asked to conduct a international masterclass to the players, the bass section of the Sinfonietta and of the Siam Philharmonic as well. There was some of the younger players, and then there was the big professional players as well. And that was a ton of fun. It was something, it was like ungodly hot. So it was like, what was cool was we didn't have to wear suits all the time. Like I know I wear suits a lot now, and that's kind of a thing. Like it's just what I'm used to. I always play shows in a tuxedo or something like that, or wear a suit. But when you're over there and it's like 100% humidity, 99 degrees, you can move the air with your hands. Even inside, the ACs are going. So we got to do it in shorts and like t-shirts, and it's like a serious masterclass.
Right.
And I just remember sitting there having these players, were some couple from the Philharmonic, older than I am and everything, performing for me to adjudicate them, and then kind of give them, well, what would be my take on it, and how would I do that, and then stand up and use one of their instruments there, because mine was still in the case during that day, which was nice, and that was cool because I got to use the Lemur Music flyaway bass. So instead of going over there and playing a bass that I had no idea about, which was originally what I was going to do, because that's what we did with the 2008 tour. So I was actually used to playing solos on instruments that I don't know.
Wow.
Every city with the 2008 Games tour was a different bass.
Wow, that's crazy.
So I'd always have to make sure, I'm like, oh my god, one would be 2 inches longer than a string length that I'm used to, some would be shorter. So you're always like, oh god, I have to redo all my shifts, and really just kind of like, for a few hours of practice to make sure the shifts were going to be right, because otherwise you'd either undershoot or overshoot if it was the wrong scale length.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So luckily with Lemur, they had, I think this was just when they finished getting the flyaway bass together, and it's in this kind of crate.
Right.
The neck comes out, but the tone, the way they were able to, you can easily pull it apart and put it together like in under 5 minutes.
Wow. Really
Brilliant how they did this. And I've used it since then multiple times, like going over to Dallas or New York, for not even just solo work, but just orchestral work too. It's just they preserve the quality of the sound of the instrument, even though you can pull the neck out. And it's amazing too, because you really don't, it's better that you do detune it just a bit, because the tension, but you don't have to.
Right.
Like I tried that once. He told me, yeah, you can. I'm like, okay, sure, why not? I put it together, and he's like, it'll be in tune. I'm like, no, it won't. Put it together, it was in tune.
Wow.
Blew my mind. So I was like, oh. So I got the first opportunity to use that for the Hong Kong tour with the Thailand part was in 2011.
Wow. That's crazy.
And that was just awesome.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, I mean, obviously, you know, a double bass is not a small instrument. And I can't imagine what it would cost.
It's insane. It costs almost like sometimes as much as what an instrument would be.
Yeah,
and you're
that's
like,
insane.
Why?
Yeah, that's just crazy. And I was wondering that too. I was going to ask you. You know,
you still get hit with an oversized charge with the crate.
Oh, I'm sure.
Kind of, but
yeah,
it's phenomenally smaller footprint.
Right, fraction of what it would be.
Because it's in a bit of a squarish rectangle, with a little bit longer. It can take the beating that the airplanes do to it.
Right.
Which I thought was awesome.
Yeah, because I've seen it before, and it's like in a flight case and everything.
Yeah, I think you probably saw the newer one that they had at the bass player this past year.
Yeah,
they had the more steel case. Before then, it was a composite case.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Which is still, so you never had to worry about an overweight charge.
Right.
But you still, like, depending on the airline, and almost all airlines, you're going to get an oversized charge.
Yeah, gotcha.
Luckily, it's not that bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, in comparison to taking the whole thing,
and then, like,
you know, built and everything. Yeah, put up.
And taking the whole thing, no matter what flight, because the flight cases for like those ones, if you want to get a flight case, there's no flight case for a real upright that will preserve it 100%.
Gotcha.
You're taking a huge gamble every time if you're going to fly with a fully together upright.
Absolutely.
And those cases are, you know, anywhere from $2,500 to $10,000 depending on who makes them.
Right.
And you're like, well, one, I don't have the money for a case like that. And
yeah,
two,
absolutely.
it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
You could show up and have your bass be in pieces. Like Mark Dresser's an amazing upright bass player, and I've heard stories about him. He saw his bass just fall out of the airplane when they're unloading it. When he saw like through the window or something. I remember someone was telling me this story. I don't know if it's true, but I know that the bass was broken. I'm pretty sure, like, if I was in that situation, I saw my instrument fall and just explode. Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like God, like because these instruments too, like with string instruments, it's a big thing. And with I actually firmly believe it with every instrument. There's a personal connection you have with your instrument.
Of course.
Even if it's with someone like a mass-produced instrument, like Gibson or Fender or something like that.
Right.
But even more so with string instruments, like each individual one, honestly they're irreplaceable.
Yeah.
Because you can get another one, it's never going to sound like that one.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
It'll be different.
Yeah.
It might be better, but it wasn't that one that you've been in love with for so
exactly.
long. Like, so
absolutely.
That's a dangerous thing. So like Lemur's flyaway bass is awesome.
Gotcha. That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to ask because it just seemed like with the amount of touring, the amount of, especially the distances, and we're not talking like, you know,
domestic. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not talking, you know, going from California to Arizona or something, you know, where you could drive it. It's like this is some serious flying. So yeah, that's crazy, man. That's really nuts. So when did I know you're using the electric uprights and stuff like that now, but when did you really go from the like acoustic uprights to the electric uprights? Like when did that kind of start taking form?
That started taking form, I think actually, right when I got back. So right before 2012, right when I got back from the tour with Dean and Mira. I think it was the 2012 NAMM show that I was really. Because I had seen the NS design instruments a couple times at the NAMM shows before, but to me I was like, well, you know, I always have this, but after the struggles of touring with the actual full-size large instrument, of course there's some things like I still have to deal with that because the big orchestras, you're not going to take the NS instrument, you have to have the real one.
Right.
But my interest in them peaked so much more that NAMM show because I'm not sure if it was me because I actually really decided to sit down and play one.
Right.
Because there's something about me was really at that time was I wanted to check out what was new.
Gotcha.
Like what is something that I can play a bow with that I could easily travel with in a car, I could go into the studios with, and also just do like, you know, amplified shows without having to be killed by feedback from the instrument and like, having to always angle your cab, try to like have like wrap towels around the bottom part of the strings to keep the sympathetic it just became such a pain having to deal with just the tech portion of the upright bass, that I was really starting to think, well, what is out there that is good?
Yeah.
And so of course I was playing like Yamahas and trying out those ones, which for pizzicato you can get away with anything. Like I think you can pretty much get away with pizzicato on any electric instrument. But to me the real test was, how does it sound with a bow?
Right.
And when I finally got to play an NS with a bow, it just changed everything for me. I was like, wow, it sounds really good. Like, yeah, it's essentially like a stick when I was first thinking about it back then. So, your initial, where the crook is in the neck, there's no body.
Gotcha.
So you're trying to figure out your old muscle memory onto this instrument that doesn't have like little cues that you're used to.
Gotcha.
It has dots on it, but then like that's something completely foreign to you too, going into that. So it's a bit of an adjustment period.
Mm-hmm.
But then all of a sudden, once you accept those, it opens up this whole other world, because then you can be playing down really low and then lightning quick go up to the top of the fingerboard and still be exactly where you need to be, because you can take a quick glance, know that you're going to land on the right note, and then just go back to using the shifting of muscle memory again.
Right.
So it opens up a whole other world of possibilities, and especially with the one that I use, the CR4M, because it has the magnetic pickups.
Okay.
All of a sudden I have this fretless bass pretty much, where it can make it sound like a fretless bass guitar, but a 41 3/4 inch string length.
Wow.
So it's just this resonance,
Yeah.
there's this sound that you get out of it you just can't get out of the bass guitar.
Right.
And you can play up high because the magnetics will keep the sustain of the string.
Right.
So I really, that's like I said, right around the beginning of 2012, I think is really when I started looking at the electric uprights. And then since then it was just slowly integrating it more into my my routine, both professionally and then practicing at home and stuff like that. And then it started to really kind of take over a bit, just because of like there's so much fun stuff you can do with it. You can manipulate it, you can run guitar pedals, and so you can bounce it up an octave, you can take it down even further with the polyoctave generators, you can throw on choruses, reverbs, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, wow, this is fucking, because I'm like, for the longest time, I'm still a bit of a tech noob when it comes to pedals. I've always done everything more organically, just from being a classical player.
Right.
I was like, didn't know.
Comes from your background.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which was really funny, because that's actually a lot of techniques I developed for the electric upright and bass guitar were because I was just so dumbfounded listening to records being like, how did they get that sound? Not knowing that there's a pedal in play.
Right.
And this a lot actually came from a delay pedal, which I didn't realize until much later on what a delay pedal even was.
Right.
And so I ended up getting my own four-finger roll on the bass and having different kind of levels of strength when I hit the string to imitate a delay.
That's cool.
And so I just kept playing and playing and listening to the records until I could try and match the sound. And then later on I'd find out it was a delay.
Yeah. The guy just clicked a button.
Clicked a button, and I won for initially it ruined it for me.
Right.
But then I went out and started playing with the pedals, and I was like, oh man, then you start thinking, well, what if I take this technique I've kind of developed and apply it to the pedal, and then all of a sudden you get these really insane subdivisions and stuff like that.
Right.
Or like these effects, and it just sounds really cool. So I've been having a lot of fun with just experimenting with what I can do with these instruments.
Yeah.
Which leads to like the original material I'm doing now, and also like the cover, like Feeling Good, that came out in Crimson Wings, where these NS instruments are like the really focal points, because of them I'm able to do all these things and imitate an entire orchestra.
Right.
Luckily, as like I got so with the electric upright, and then talking with my AR about NS, and they're such a wonderful people because they believe in what you do. They were able to send me out a 5-string cello first, and I could tune it, and just work with a bunch of different strings to tune it into fourths.
Okay.
And then so I have like a piccolo upright bass.
Gotcha.
And then I realized, I'm like, okay, but I want to be able to play higher if I want to play that string on wood sound that you get out of a violin, instead of just using false harmonics, which sound like bells. So the lines I was writing and I wanting to play, I realized I was going to need something else to happen. And it was funny because it was a NAMM show where John Liebman from Four Bass Players Only was walking by, and kind of chuckled that I had like a violin in my lap when I was playing, because this wasn't even before I even had the idea for it. I was just bored sitting there with a violin in my lap, and he chuckled and laughed and said, that's kind of a cool idea. And I actually took it to heart, being like, that's actually not a bad idea. Like, I don't know violin, but I know thumb position. And what if I already had a cello I could tune in fourths. What if I could find the strings to tune the violin in fourths?
Right.
So it's like, then became the birth of the idea of the super piccolo bass.
Right, yeah.
And then now that just kicks my ass all the time. Because you go from having, these big spaces between the notes to this really tiny fingerboard.
Right.
And I'm playing it in the caddy, or I'm playing it in my lap, depending on where I'm at in the studio or at home. Just in thumb position, so it takes a lot of sharp curve on finding the intonation, the spacing. And luckily, there's a fretted option, which helped me a lot in the beginning. And then I have the fretless one as well, because you can really get that nice, beautiful fretless sound.
Right.
But the funny thing, which is when I first got the fretted one, I was so excited because I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to worry about intonation. Wrong. The strings are so thin that it doesn't matter if you play in the middle of the fret, you're flat. You have to play right on the fret. Yeah. So it's just more of like it's more tactile than anything. You can feel that you're in the right spot.
That's cool.
And then just constantly doing that over again and feeling that right spot, and then going to a fretless one made it. I was like, okay, now I know where to play again. And then I could layer those sounds like I did in the recording to get that lush orchestra sound. And then the more advanced things I would do to imitate an orchestra, where I would I lay out the parts 12, 13 times as like a big full violin section of violin 1, then do violin 2, viola, cello, and then double bass to imitate the orchestra. And so in learning of doing that, when I did Crimson Wings, I recorded all the parts, because I had to do everything was with a click. I recorded it virtually perfectly, like dead in, vibrato the same, because I was just like, it's me, I want that sound. And then when we listened back, it just, something seemed dead about it.
Right, didn't have life.
It wasn't quite alive, it was mechanical.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I played everything, and I couldn't, and then I started thinking, I'm like, well wait, I've played in all these orchestras, what's a major problem that orchestras have, but there's actually a beauty to it, phasing.
Gotcha.
The slow phasing between the group and actually phasing somewhat in between your own section.
Right.
And having someone play, so in my concept I started to think, okay, my principal desks would be perfect in the recording. Dead on with the click, just right in and making sure the intonation was dead on. Those players were going to be my perfect players in my mind, kind of like for the musical acting.
Right.
And then as I move a desk back in the sections, maybe I'm a hair ahead. And maybe the next player's a hair behind.
Right.
And the bow speed is, I want to make sure the bows are the same for most of the parts until they got to separate DVC parts. But maybe the bow speed was slower on one player and faster on another. And then all of a sudden, when I started re-recording parts over again, putting them out, it sounded like a real group. And I was like, that's the secret to it. Yeah, it's like you have and it was cool. And it's funny because I know a lot of questions I've gotten from it too would be like, you have like an ego trip? Do you want to play all these parts? And it's actually no. It originally came down, and this was the song before was Feeling Good. I was actually going to hire my studio buddies and everyone to be on that record, and I was just going to do the solo line. Well, a bunch of them got picked up on a tour, and then I had some setbacks, and so I just couldn't financially afford them.
Right.
And instead of giving up, I just really sat there and thought, like, well, what if I played the parts?
Right.
Because I really wanted to get that song out, I wanted to get it done, and then it also became like more of like a fun project too. Like, I'm gonna try and play, try be in Feeling Good, a big band.
Right.
And it worked. And I really loved it. It was so much fun. So then when I moved on to Crimson Wings, I expanded it out even further and did a symphonic rock orchestra.
Right.
And then now with my original material, with the song The Music That Was Us, which you got to see and listen to as like a private pre-release for everyone. Sorry guys, but that one's going to be coming a little bit later, but Keith got to see it ahead.
You're going to want to see it. It's crazy.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely.
And that, the parts got out even further, but it was in that same style of being able to play everyone. And for me, it's not, I actually just think of it as funny as musical acting, like being a part of so many different orchestras and been soloist with a lot of groups too. But there's beautiful oboe lines and beautiful cello lines and clarinet lines and all these things, and of course violin lines that are going on. And as a player, you're like, I wish I got to play those.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Especially as a bass player in
absolutely.
the orchestra, where you're playing. Yeah, there's some beautiful lyrical parts, but a lot of times you're just underscoring with a lot of whole notes.
Yep.
And so, like, I was like, well, this is my opportunity to be, everybody in the orchestra I've always wanted to be. I've always heard beautiful lines in the flutes. I'm like, man, what if I got to play those lines?
Right. No, it's cool, man. No, I mean, and yeah, that new track and video is awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure and a joy to listen to. It was pretty crazy, man. And we sat there. I mean, and for people that don't know, we sat and talked about it for about 20 minutes afterwards. Just that me asking him questions on what he was doing and how he was doing different things. And no, it's really cool, and to see to hear and see you play all those parts and know that you are playing all those parts.
Yeah,
it's not just doubling tracks or anything like that. Yeah, it's all of them. But
it's like 10 tupling tracks or something.
Yeah, right.
Playing the same part over and over again, but with the different instruments, and that's where a huge thank you to NS for that, because of all the instruments that I was able to use to play that. On top of my other instruments, like with Warrior instruments, and then of course Tsunami Cables were everywhere, because I just love the cables thoroughly, like super thoroughly, the best sound, and I can preserve it. And anywhere I go and I plug in, I know I'm going to get the sound that I want coming out of the speakers that I want. So it's like, it's great.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's awesome. And that's actually was the next thing I was going to get to was some of your gear. We've talked about the NS stuff. Why don't you talk a little bit about that beautiful Warrior? This
is actually the oldest one besides the first bass guitar that I got, which was at a music shop. But this Warrior I got back in 2007, actually. That was my first NAMM show that I went to. And I was playing about all these beautiful basses, and something about this just stuck out. It played in my hands. I loved the way it felt. And they took chance. They took a chance. They did. Warrior Instruments took a chance on me and brought me on as an artist.
Very cool.
And I was able to get this instrument, and I've just been happily in love with it ever since. I try to take really good care of it. Like, I like that it still looks pretty new, even though it's played almost every day for 11 years now.
Yeah.
It's my workhorse. I do a lot of composition on it.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, the woodwork on it is amazing. I mean, not being a string player, I can definitely appreciate the woodwork. And yeah, the wood and everything else that was done, the craftsmanship on it is just absolutely amazing. So, and I've seen you play it obviously a handful of times, but yeah, it's a beautiful instrument. It's really cool.
I love it thoroughly, and it's one of those instruments that feels like my real upright and my NS upright too. For guitar instruments, this is home to me. This is definitely home. Like, I can pick up other bass guitars and stuff like that and play and enjoy it and have fun, but this particular one just always feels like home.
Yeah,
like, I'm comfortable. I'm happy.
Totally.
I just like it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I can definitely understand that. Cool. So let's talk about that first bass that you got.
The first bass guitar.
Yeah, because I think it's always a fun one to ask. Is like the first instrument. In this case, we'll go first bass guitar.
Yeah.
But yeah. So what was that first one that you had?
That first one I still have it. Okay. It's kind of a seafoam greenish color.
Nice, okay.
Came with like a blue pickguard, but I changed it to a pearl pickguard because I thought it was awesome.
Okay.
Fender Mexican Jazz.
Okay.
And I got that at the guitar shop at Laguna Beach.
Nice.
And that was kind of like a hole in the wall place. They're still there, and they're awesome. Like, they do their own Lutherie there.
Gotcha.
But it was just a place where I was like, because when we moved from Canada down, like, we didn't really even know about guitar centers or anything like that. Course, yeah. And we just happened to, this was somewhat close to where we moved to, and so I kept going, asking Mom and Dad, can we go to the guitar shop again? I want to check out all these instruments, and I happened to fall in love with this one bass, because they had a bunch of basses there, but that one Fender just happened to sit in my hands nicely, and that's where I had the realization, like, oh my God, like, you can do these big stretches, because before that was just the high school upright bass. So essentially my first bass, quote unquote, would have been the high school upright bass
Upright,
there
yeah.
that I got to play. But
Right.
the one actually first bass I ever got to own was a bass guitar,
Yeah,
and that was that Fender.
that's cool.
And I still have it.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
awesome.
it. I try to keep it in good shape. It's a little beat up. It's,
Yeah.
it's like, especially when you're a kid and you have it, you're towing it around,
Oh, yeah.
taking it on the bus to go to your friend's house to jam.
Right.
It bangs into stuff.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I love it.
That's very cool. All right, so what bass, or let's I'll put it this way, since you have so many different instruments, what instrument would you save if they were all in a burning building? So they're in a burning building,
Oh,
you've
man.
got to run in and you've got to save one instrument, just one.
Just one.
Just one. Which one would it be?
That's not fair.
That's not fair.
That's tough. It's so tough because each one, there's like, it's like each section has like their like
Right.
the one. I'd probably have to save my traditional upright, my real upright.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is that?
That is a Bjorn Stoll German double bass, and
Okay.
it's a unique beauty. It's a one of a kind because it's a little bit off in its dimensions from the rest of the ones that they built from that stencil, pretty much, because the upright builders
Okay.
are like string builders. They have like their shapes that they build from, and of course each one's very unique and different.
Right.
But this one's actual dimensions across the whole instrument were smaller
Oh, wow.
than what they originally wanted. But it made it the perfect solo instrument because there's this phenomena about basses that these big full-size 4/4 basses, well, yeah, they sound huge when you're around it, but
Right.
walk 20 feet away, and then now you're in a concert hall, walk 50 feet, 100 feet.
Right.
That sound, that volume, and that projection, it goes down fast.
Gotcha.
But these small basses can cut through the air and project so much further
Gotcha.
than the big ones. So when you're sitting next to a full-size instrument and you're playing, you feel like you're getting blown out of the water.
Right.
But you're actually not. You're
Yeah.
carrying and sustaining way over. And it's actually been a wonderful bass too for principal playing, is because it sits really well in the orchestra,
Okay.
but just above the rest of the section.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
It has this, and so you can really lead with it very well,
Yeah,
because
that's it.
everyone can hear
Yeah.
you play.
Right. That makes
And
sense.
it's just it's had moments where I've been very mad at it because it's not very old.
Okay.
It's not a really old instrument. So it was still having its like settling phase,
Gotcha,
and
okay.
there'd be times where like all of a sudden the strings would just be like ridiculously high off the fingerboard because changes in the atmosphere, and it was
Oh, wow.
the wood itself is still settling.
Right.
Now it's starting to calm down a little bit more.
Wow.
And it's kind of the thing like that we like to say with uprights is it takes about 50 years from when it was crafted
Wow.
before it really starts to sink into what it's going to sound like,
Wow.
and stop these really abrupt changes in the way the wood kind of bends and moves and stuff like
Gotcha.
that. And after the
amazing.
first 10 years is where it really starts, like the first 10 years is where it's rough.
Right. I bet.
And then it starts to dip down. So mine's over that hump, but it still
Okay.
has moments. But I started with upright. It's my
Yeah,
there's this
absolutely.
beauty to it. But if I was running in there, it's kind of like a duel. Like the bass and the bow would have. Like,
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah.
So I
Yeah,
kind
because
of-
we were talking about that
complementary.
earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were talking about give me. I don't remember the numbers again, but you were saying
it's,
the bow is so much more of the sound
yeah.
than the
So
instrument.
a lot of people don't realize with string instruments is the bow is what's really important for the tone quality and sound production. And it's really about 70% of your tone comes
So
from the
crazy.
bow,
That's crazy.
not
to
the
me.
instrument.
That's insane.
And then all of a sudden you start to realize, well, yeah, this violin player has $60,000 bow. It's a stick. It's
Yeah.
a piece of wood.
Right.
And we're like, I can't really bark either because my bow's not that much, because bass bows just don't cost that much, thank God.
Yeah.
But it's quite up there, and
Yeah.
it's comparable with actually more valuable than most of my instruments. It's
Wow.
and that's something that you build up to over time too, because
course.
the more master crafted this bow is, the more exposed you are as a musician. It
Can understand that.
pulls this beautiful tone out of the instrument, but it's so clean that you can't hide.
Yeah.
And so that's why there's like the different grades of bows. As you start out, you have these bows that kind of can hide your intonation maybe, or hide the tone. Production can be a little bit fuzzier, and it's just as time goes on, it's more forgiving. That's the best way to say it. As time goes on, and you want to progress into these other bows, you really start to realize, oh my God, like it's just, and it ups, for me, I always thought it was like this great way to up your musicianship was when you go try out another bow and all this kind of stuff. And then you really find the ones that were like, the ones where you sound, not that you sound bad, but you know that you're like, wow, I can hear mistakes and I can hear these, like this is actually probably the bow that's going to make me a better player.
Right, yeah, of course, absolutely. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, it's amazing to me that so much is based off of just a bow. Just a stick with,
but it's
some
the way it's the way it's crafted, the weight, the kind of wood. I'm a huge fan of Pernambuco wood on bows. Like it's just amazing, and I have a bow that it's second to none. It's an amazing bow, and I got very lucky to be able to own it. And it was a bow that belonged to a very dear friend who passed away, who's also the proprietor, him and his wife, proprietor of Libre Music.
Oh, okay.
And it was Jerry Buffa, and this was his bow.
Wow.
And the fact that I was able to be considered to own this bow was a big honor, for one.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And two, the bow itself is it's a Matthias Hoyer, and the wood is this Pernambuco wood that is extremely from old stock, old, beautiful, and the sound that it can just pull out of any instrument you put it on.
Wow.
You are super exposed.
I bet.
And but it's got this beautiful tone, and it's for solo playing, it's absolutely wonderful. And orchestra playing, it's great too, because you sit, like it just picks notes out and just shoots them throughout the air. It's wonderful. And so I'm very thankful to own that bow.
Oh, absolutely.
So I have a little piece of Jerry with me.
Right, yeah, absolutely. A piece of history, absolutely. Yeah, that's crazy. All right, so what is the worst thing that has happened to you on stage?
On stage?
On stage. These are always good ones.
I've had a few things happen.
Well, what's the first one that popped in your head?
First one that popped through my head actually was something simple, but it ended up being catastrophic. There was a little crack in the stage that I was at, and my end pin happened to, because I was playing, and I happen to move a lot when I play.
Okay.
And then I kind of felt uncomfortable, and I adjusted the spot because my end pin was very sharp.
Gotcha.
So I usually like to pierce where I'm at on the stage, if they allow that at the stage. Otherwise, I bring a stopper and stuff like that. And I just happened to lightly move it, and that crack was there, and it happened to maybe got a little bit more opened up because I was wiggling on the stage above it while I was playing, and so the end pin just went right into it, and bottomed out my bass. And this was this was a long time ago. This was a different bass that I had, and it luckily it didn't break the bass or anything, but a huge boom.
Yeah.
And this is a classical concert, so keep in mind, it's just a nice slow movement too, where we're just everything went really from being heavy to all of a sudden, and that's where I felt the opportunity to move my instrument, because I had a couple bars of rest, and all this lush upper strings and flute part was going on, and all of a sudden, boom, huge, loud sound. Yeah. And of course, it startles the hell out of me. I fall out of my chair.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And everyone's like, what happened?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And they see the instrument, the end pin's in the stage.
Yeah.
It's like that crack in there. So there was a whole kind of fuffle that happened after that with the people who set up the stage and stuff.
Yeah.
Because that was some serious damage could have happened, but luckily it didn't.
Right.
But that was one that came to mind just because of the sheer abruptness of that. Everybody in the audience knew what happened, that something went wrong, because it was loud.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so we're going to get to these last couple of questions. I've been doing this with each one of the podcasts, so this is kind of like your the first thing that comes to your mind. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, just the first thing that pops in your mind. So what is your favorite word?
My favorite word?
Yeah.
Oh. Wow. I didn't even think a word really comes out. Favorite word? I've not been asked that question before. Strive? Let's strive.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good one. What's your least favorite word?
Least favorite word? Disappointment.
Disappointment. Okay. What's the sound or noise that you love?
Bass.
Bass.
Sound of low frequencies, but well, not all low. It's that there's bass can have this, has that tonal range where it can just sweep through the lows and up into these upper mids, where it's just this. So that whole sonic frequency of like, particularly the upright bass of what it can do is just,
Right.
it's gorgeous to me. I love it.
Absolutely. What's the sound or noise that you hate?
Chewing.
Chewing. I think that's actually the second time we've had that. Actually, that's hilarious. That's really funny. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
That's interesting. Just the way that's phrased, too, because attempt versus like.
Well,
if
what
I wasn't doing this,
Right.
I'd be doing something else.
Yeah, what would
Even
you
attempt would be.
Yeah. What would you like to do other than being a bass player?
I really like medicine. I'd probably be a doctor.
Okay,
And
interesting.
a surgeon because I like to work with my hands. I've always
Right.
been fascinated by
Interesting.
surgeries. It's just amazing, and then also just because medicine really is not an exact science at all. It is almost like a. You have to think of it almost like a kind of like a hive mind a bit, and that's because I've had a lot of medical problems in my life. So I've been around a lot of doctors, and it's not just your one best guess, but it's the best guess of all these people together, and then you try to come together and find out what the right step is going to be next.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
Okay, that's cool. I like that. All right, last one. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome.
I like it. Awesome. All right, Chance, where can everybody find you?
Everyone can find me at my website,
Okay.
which is my full name, would be chancewilderonody.com, and that would be ChanceWilderonody.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chance, for coming
Thank you
out,
for having me.
man. I
This is
appreciate
awesome.
it.
It's
It
been
was
fun
great
just to chill, hang back for a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was fun. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it, and I will talk to you guys soon. Peace.